Welcome to City 31, a model of peace in a post-invasion world. However, not all of Earth's inhabitants support interspecies alliance. Chimera Squad, an elite force of human and alien agents, must work together to destroy the underground threats driving the city towards chaos.
While the world patiently waits for Firaxis Games to develop XCOM 3, Chimera Squad is here to fill the gap left behind. Bringing a new story-based single squad game with the tried and tested mechanics of XCOM 2, does it succeed in providing fresh new gameplay to the XCOM series? Let's find out. Graphical options are pretty much the same as you'd find in XCOM 2. Not that you need a particularly powerful rig to play this, as unlike the other recent XCOM games, the maps in Chimera are far smaller and with a lot less variety. The overall graphical style of Chimera is a bit of a mixed bag. The overall look of the gameplay is about the same as XCOM 2, with isometric layouts and destructible maps still the order of the day. No other game of its type has ever come close to being as dynamic to play as the XCOM series, like for example when you carefully plan an ambush with your squad, only to have it ruined by a carefully placed alien grenade wiping out all of your cover. The game has a fixed squad of units that you play throughout the game. They are all uniquely modelled and they look fine, being easy to tell who's who in the field. You are limited to tinting their armour colour though, so there is not really the same level of customisation as in the previous XCOM games. Between encounters you find yourself in the map room, which is a very basic version of the globe room that we found in previous titles. The graphical style remains very XCOM, which is again a very stark contrast to the comic style presentation, which is what I do find very off-putting, this strange comic book styling used for the cutscenes and character dialogue. I feel this was a design choice rather than just a way to cut costs. I mean, almost all dialogue in the game is done through comic style static headshots of each character, and it just does not feel right to me at all. I mean, even the lips don't move, there's no animation, it's just static images, and I just think it just looks, I don't know, it just doesn't fit. Possibly because XCOM has always been a fairly serious, almost gritty style of game with a graphical style to match, and suddenly we are in the middle of a superhero cartoon? Nah, this styling just does not work. The audio in the two previous XCOM games were excellent. The music was spot on, the effects and background sounds of the various maps were on point, and personally I really liked most of the voice acting. Now let us break this down bit by bit. The music. The underlying tone of the music in Chimera is that of a cheesy cartoon action movie. It is awful. There is no sense of urgency, no feeling of tension when an enemy spots you and the music ramps up. Naturally it fits the style Firaxis were aiming for in the game overall, but personally I do not like that either. The effects in the game are pretty much what you have heard in other XCOM games. Explosions sound explodey, weapons sound like they did before, moving, jumping, that's all present and correct. It's the voice acting that killed the game for me. Every character just sounds like they are right out of a new X-Men team, with ridiculous quips and terrible one-liners that seem designed to appeal to your typical hipster.
A short while ago, Grey Phoenix engaged unknown assailants at this location. After the shooting stopped, Grey Phoenix locked down the whole block.
Would you say our arrival is key?
Why did I ever teach you puns?
Because you're very instructive.
Kill me now.
Their mannerisms, the delivery of their lines, it's just beyond cheesy to being outright awful. During combat they all sound like they are reading lines from a script. There is absolutely no connection to what you are seeing at all. Terminal, for example, one of the characters in the game, sounds just like a bratty teenage girl probably more at home waving placards and banners around a street march for a cause she does not really care about, but just has to be involved with. You know the type. The rest of the characters are pretty much the same, or caricatures of the personalities that they were designed to match, and it sounds utterly terrible. Actually, it reminds me quite a lot of the Ghostbusters movie from a few years ago, and if you do not know what I'm talking about, trust me, just keep it that way. You don't want to know. Simply put, the audio matches the style of the game, which is not my cup of green herbal tea. I am a huge fan of the XCOM series, and so it is going to be that I will compare this to XCOM 2, which is clearly using the same game engine. Now, you play as... actually, I am not sure who your character is. You see, unlike XCOM where you play as the commander, there is no defined player role in Chimera, so it would appear that you simply guide the team as opposed to actually commanding them. Anyway, you play as a new team of XCOM city enforcers made up of XCOM personnel and aliens from the war that ended 5 years ago. Bear with me here, the story does get worse. The city is called City 31, and it appears to be an experiment to see if aliens, hybrids and humans can all get along. The apparent leader of all this is one Mayor Nightingale, a sectoid, a female sectoid, who seems determined to bring peace and tranquility to the city. When things inevitably go wrong, the XCOM team is of course blamed for everything. Happily, the new squad still has the backing from their superiors, or at least for now. The game has the crew running around City 31, righting wrongs and finding out who is ultimately responsible for the shenanigans. Primarily, you will be investigating 3 main groups of baddies, which involve a few standard missions, leading up to gaining more information during the course of these missions, and finally taking the group down. These missions are pretty straightforward: retrieve something, kill something, blow up something, you know, the usual kind of thing. The main aim of the game is to complete all the investigations before the unrest meter is filled, much like the Avatar project in XCOM 2. Unrest is settled by completing missions and field team rewards. Field teams are a similar mechanic to the resistance radio towers in the previous games, and may provide a small perk every week, such as reducing unrest in a district or providing extra credits. These teams give further abilities in districts which you can use to reduce unrest further. For XCOM players, everything will initially look very familiar. However, there are noticeable differences which drastically change up the gameplay. Now, firstly, each mission starts with what's called breach mode. This is essentially your team kicking down doors or blowing up walls to gain entry to the next room, but adds an additional element of strategy. Each breach point comes with an effect, positive or negative. Some have you gain a second action point, some give crits on successful hits, and so on. Some are limited to the number of units that can enter, forcing you to use another breach point, and some have negative effects like no cover, meaning damage will likely or be guaranteed. Usually these negative effects come with a useful positive one, so it is up to you on how to proceed. It does offer quite a good and varied level of strategy when you're entering a building or a room for the first time. Of course, you rarely know exactly what is on the other side of the door, and that is where the second phase comes in handy. So for each agent you have the option of picking a target and shooting them, or if you feel the odds are not entirely in your favour, you can dash for cover, which will give bonus defence and dodge. Once each agent has done their thing, and if there was a chance of agent damage, then the enemy would have a quick turn. Once that is done, everyone scatters for cover and the main phase begins, which brings us to the second main change of the game. In the original XCOM games, on the player's turn you are free to choose which unit to move and when to use an action. This allowed for strategic planning, such as moving a unit into a better position before setting Overwatch, and then using another unit to remove their cover. Now this is not really possible in Chimera. Instead, it is a turn-by-turn system. You take one turn, the enemy takes 1 turn, and so on. Now there is still some strategy available here, as if you kill or subdue an enemy out of turn, then the previous unit will still take their turn, so you do still gain an advantage in taking out specific targets, rather than whenever is nearest. However, this of course assumes the RNG gods are smiling upon you this day. Yes, the RNG gameplay is still present and correct in Chimera, along with the dubious aiming mechanic. 99% chance shots still miss when standing next to an enemy unit, even if standing directly behind them. I often wonder if the units in the XCOM universe perhaps trained in the same facilities as the Star Wars Imperial Stormtroopers, such as the repeated inaccuracy of point-blank range shots. This makes planning an assault on a unit further down the timeline risky, as if you ignore other enemies they can quickly take you out. Now although they too seem to be just as affected by the RNG, as at one point I had a single agent left facing something like 8 mutons who all missed repeatedly until she escaped. Speaking of missing, agents cannot die in this game. No, seriously, the worst that can happen is they can pass out and an android just rolls in to take their place. Slightly inconvenient as the androids do not have the same skills as your downed unit, but it does allow you to complete the mission. Now the only penalty you have for dying in this game is a scar. Scars cause debilitation to stats, and these can be removed over time by having your agent visit the training section of the base. Instead of healing, your unit adapts instead, but this takes a few days and keeps them unavailable for use. Now, due to the nature of this game, unit death probably wouldn't be very good. It'd be incompatible with the story. So I guess this is as good a way of doing it as any. The problem is, for me, I just do not feel involved enough in the game or the story. Unlike the XCOM 2 Tactical Legacy Pack missions, where you played the part of Central, or Bradford to give his real name, and told the story between XCOM 1 and XCOM 2, I simply do not like or care about the squad in Chimera. The fact that Firaxis have deliberately targeted the game to appeal to a certain demographic in the hope of getting these people interested in the XCOM series is so obvious it is almost laughable. I can almost imagine some sales executives standing in front of the 2K board in their suit and tie, PowerPoint presentation on the wall behind them, explaining they want to expand the appeal of XCOM, and to do this we need to be, pausing to pull out a pair of Ray-Ban shades from his jacket pocket, slipping them on and finishing his sentence, cool. Then 2K proceed to make the worst possible attempt at developing a game designed to appeal to such people. Look, I am painfully aware that I am definitely not their chosen demographic, and that's fine. However, trying to mash together two completely different genres into one game just cannot work, and it ends up making Chimera just impossible to like or want to play. Now I eagerly look forward to XCOM 3, and I just hope Firaxis go back to the tried and tested method of making great XCOM games, because they have utterly failed on this attempt.